Hi, I'm Ruth and welcome to the Flow into Health podcast. What does it mean to flow into health? It means living in sync with the energy around you, things like your menstrual cycle, the moon, and the seasons. It means going with the flow and softening into what you may not like in your life and learning to release resistance. And it means understanding how energy flows in our bodies so we can optimize it and feel our very best. Hello and welcome back. This week, I want to talk a little bit about our morning routine. I am really curious what other people do in the morning. This is something I didn't really pay a lot of attention to until 2018 when I heard Hal Elrod talk about the miracle morning. Have you heard about it? It's when you spend time going through the savers, which stands for silence or meditation, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, reading, and scribing, which is writing or journaling. Hal talks about how all the most successful people do all of these things and really tries to convince his audience that waking up early to do almost a 2-hour morning routine every day will set up your day. I heard about this when I had a 2-year-old at home and I was pregnant with my second. Guess how well I was able to incorporate these things into my life? Well, honestly, I probably did better than you'd expect, but it stressed me out. Oh my gosh. Your morning routine should not stress you out. I repeat, your morning routine should not stress you out. If you're waking up super tired and forcing yourself out of bed to do all of the things that you think you should be doing, it's not going to feel good. And what was happening to me is I would wake up early and the next thing I know, a toddler would hear me wake up and decide that 5 a.m. is a good time to party, even though that was supposed to be my time. And that made me, 1, stressed out, and 2, not the mom that I want to be. You don't need to stress out over finishing your morning routine if something distracts you. What I was doing is I would decide okay, my kid is up, I can maybe read while they're playing, and then I can exercise during lunchtime, and then I can meditate before bed. And pretty soon, every little extra amount of time that I had during the day is filled up with these things that I should be doing. By the time dinner came around, if I wasn't up to date on my to-do list with meditations and visualizations, I'd stress out and wonder how I was going to do it all before bed. And what I would find is instead of paying attention to my family, I'm trying to get all of these things done and do all of these things that I think I should be doing, when really, I wish I would have been spending that time with my family and enjoying them. I was honestly turning my self-care into a to-do list. But once I removed things like meditate and journal and take a walk from my to-do list, I can't believe how much better I feel. The funny thing is, I still end up doing these things almost every day, but now I don't get stressed out when life happens and I don't get to one of these things. So what can we do instead? How can we create a relaxing morning that doesn't add more stress? I think the answer lies in whether you prefer structure or not. Do you like to follow a routine, or do you prefer to do new things each day? You probably know which feels more like you. But if you don't, you can also look at your human design chart. If you're not familiar with it, human design is a pretty complex system that shows how we best use our energy, and there is a ton of information in it. But if you want to think about whether you like structure or not, you can pull your chart. Towards the top, there will be 4 arrows either pointing left or right. The top left arrow is the one we're interested in right now. This arrow is all about how you take in the world and whether you prefer it to be structured or not. If it's left facing, your energy prefers to have structure. You'll likely feel better doing something similar each day. And if it's right facing, you probably prefer to change things up and go with what feels best in the moment. So if your arrow is pointing left, the idea of the savers or something similar probably works really well for you. Another option that I've played with is doing an activity for each of the different elements of astrology. So each day you would do one from each water, air, earth, and fire. And so some of the activities I think of for water would be meditating or doing a practice that allows you to feel your feelings, whether that's journaling or just feeling into your body, or even just doing some yoga. For air practices, these are things that have to do with the mind and communication. So things that I like to do around air would be journaling, reading, or listening to a podcast. For the earth element, things like going outside or organizing, or maybe doing some gardening would feel good. And then some of the fire practices I think of are high intensity workouts, or you can just get up and sing and dance to really let some of that creativity and fire out. If your arrow is pointing left, it probably feels good to come up with a plan and stick with it for a while. You're less likely to get bored with that plan, and you're more likely to stick with it and have that feel good for you. But if the arrow is pointing right, you're going to feel better to do something different each day, most likely. So maybe some days you want to do a whole bunch of self-care things, like you want to go through the savers, and that's going to feel good. But then other days it might feel better to stay in bed and do nothing. And lately, something that's been surprising me is that it feels good to just get up, get out of bed, and start working. Maybe one day you want to go to the gym and work out. Another morning, meditating and journaling feels good. For me, I like to ask my intuition what's going to feel good each day. Inside each of us, we know what's going to be best for us, and we know what's going to light us up and what's going to feel good. So each day might be similar with a couple of different changes, or maybe it's going to look completely different every day, and maybe that has to do with what you have planned or things that are going on that day, and so your intuition would know what's going to set you up for the best day possible. But it's really fun to see what our intuition suggests. If you have a harder time talking to your intuition, I would love to work with you, and we can practice talking to our intuition so it's something that comes more easily to you over time. And until you're comfortable with your intuition, one thing that might feel good is looking at what sign the moon is in, and then doing one of the activities I listed before based on the element of the moon. So if the moon is in Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, you can do a water practice, like maybe meditating. If the moon is in Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, you can do the air practices like journaling. If the moon is in Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, you can do one of the earth practices like walking outside in nature. And if the moon is in Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, you can do the fire practices like a high intensity workout. So if you plan your mornings like this, you're going to be doing something new each day, and you're also kind of feeling into the energy of that day. The moon is always there as a background feeling of how we all feel in the day. And so by using that element of the moon, it's going to help us ease into the feeling of the day. So, for example, when the moon is in Gemini, you might just have a lot on your mind, and you might find yourself thinking about different things and almost feel like a little squirrel brain where it's like, ooh, this, and what about this, and what about that? And so journaling some of that to get it out of your head will help you feel more peaceful throughout the day. You can also use those elements and those pieces of the morning routine based on which element you have the least of. So if you don't think of yourself as a very emotional person, for example, planning some days to do the water activities will help to balance out your elemental balance. It could also just be fun to write down different things that you like to do on different pieces of paper and randomly pick one. And then based on how much time you have, maybe you pick one, maybe you pick two, maybe you have time for 5. But it's almost like picking an oracle or a tarot card. And I believe that there's a big part of your intuition that's involved with selecting which paper is going to give you the most benefit and be perfect for you that day. But the very most important thing is to not stress out over it. Do what feels good to you and helps you feel better. And maybe for some of you, that means not having a morning routine at all. Maybe you are just not a morning person, and that is okay, and be completely okay with that. But I do believe that being intentional helps us feel better throughout the day. I hope you'll agree that a morning routine is a very personal thing. I watch what people without kids are doing and sometimes wish I had the time to set up my day like that. But being present with what's actually going on in our lives and releasing the shoulding will help our energy far more than a 2-hour morning routine will. When we stress ourselves out with more things we should be doing or compare ourselves to people who are in a totally different phase of life, we're setting ourselves up for failure. The best way to start your morning is to set up a structure that works for you, even if that means no structure. And be sure not to worry about whether you're doing enough. You are always enough. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you can be notified when new episodes are released. And if you know of anybody else who might enjoy this content, I'd really appreciate you sharing the Flow into Health podcast with them. If you can't think of anyone else to share the podcast with, a 5-star review really helps others find the podcast. Thanks for listening today. I am so grateful to the podcast listeners, and I want to continue creating content that you want to hear. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them, and maybe an upcoming episode will be recorded with you in mind. See you next time.